Howdy, Quentin, Idget Reads and Rambles, and I needed to do a standalone video for this one because this is a really interesting book that I'm not even going to be able to unpack in one video. Just a really dense book, but Blue of Noon by Georges Bataille. Okay, before I start with what the hell this is, understand this is Bataille. It's going to be philosophical, it's going to be transgressive, it's going to be sort of hallucinatory, and it's going to be filthy. This thing is absolutely filthy. If you're not down with transgressive literature, you know where the door is. Yeah, I'm not going to go too far into the transgression of this book because actually it's not the focus, but it is there. I mean, there is a scene where two people make love in a graveyard. Yeah, there's that, and there's more in these pages, but I think a helpful comparison would be his Story of the Eye. This book has stuck in my mind ever since I read it a little bit ago. This is sort of about transgression. It is a philosophy of transgression, why we transgress, what we discover about ourselves when we transgress, and where this need to sort of start out with one small transgression and to slowly build and build until you reach the pinnacle of self-knowledge, the pinnacle of transgression that is contained in the symbols of this book. That's what this is. This is a more focused novel than Blue of Noon, I think, too. But Story of the Eye, the name of the game is Transgression. Blue of Noon, the name of the game is historical and social sort of analysis. That's very much what this is. It is, of course, it never gets to heights of depravity like Story of the Eye, but it does get to heights of filthiness. Actually, the opening scene where a woman just soils herself when they're drunk, and these people have to like clean them up. It's just dirty, you know, and it's sort of just abject, like just oh man, like it's really dirty. Not in the same way, not as twisted. The Story of the Eye, although it is twisted. That's what this is. It's a historical novel, and his method is really interesting because, you know, of course, he has a talent for symbolism, but his method here is completely allegorical. It is sort of, it was written after Story of the Eye, which I think was published 1928, I should say. This was written in 1935, didn't come out till after World War II, but being the sort of social analysis in leading up to World War II that this thing is, it totally prophesies World War II in one of the most, it is a scene I think that is as sickening as anything in Story of the Eye, the scene of the Nazis playing their music. Oh my god, it is just so haunting given the hindsight, like that this book sort of predicts. Like, oh my god, just knowing what we know about that scene is haunting as hell. Totally worth reading the book, just and it's a short book, but it's totally worth reading the book just to get to that one scene. But it's also a sort of political allegory that is taking a lot of what's going on at the time and applying it to France. We'll get to that. And then, you know, of course it is Bataille, so we know what sort of who Bataille is. He's here. He's here in spades. We'll just get into the characters because this is where a lot of the historical analysis is gonna start to come to the forefront, right? So our main character, I think his name is Henry Troutman. I might be getting the name wrong, but at any rate, Troutman is his last name. He is sort of symbolic of France's Third Republic. So what that makes this is that, of course, it is an analysis of social forces at the time of World War II, but it's mainly France's role in it and the choices France has to make between three women that come to the Third Republic, come to Troutman, right? There is the ancient regime, right, of France, the sort of monarchical system, the ancient regime, of course, that is symbolized by a character named Dirty. Her name is Dorothea, but she goes by Dirty for much of the book, and that is ultimately who the narrator winds up with, although it's never going to work out with the ancient regime anyways. But Dirty's a really sort of just destructive, shameful character. The narrator is constantly insisting that Dirty is beautiful when Dirty never demonstrates beauty one time in the novel. The next lady that the narrator, the Third Republic, has to choose between is either, ancient regime or Lazar, which is basically this wave of communism that is coming throughout Europe, and it is sort of threatening to take France. And he is immediately disgusted by Lazar, totally disgusted by Lazar. But after a while, he actually talks to Lazar's father, and there's some really interesting critiques leveled at communism that are pretty unhinged, actually. It's just like, what's the point of all of this? Because the Third Republic is a nihilist. It doesn't believe in any sort of meaning. So of course the critique it levels at communism is, if the working classes, if we all agree that the working classes are screwed, which there's no question in this novel that the working classes are screwed. It's just taken as like totally a given. If there's any question, why are you still communist? Why does it matter? Why should I give a shit? Basically is the question, right? And Lazar keeps on going, keeps doing her thing without thinking about it, but her father is just totally like broken by this in a really interesting way. And then the next woman that the Third Republic has to choose between is, there's the ancient regime, there's the wave of communism that is sweeping Europe and which will ultimately could ultimately lead to death. There is also Génie, who is sort of representative of the bourgeoisie, right? And what Génie is to the narrator is basically just like a useless plaything that he could sort of toy with, and that will heal him, but that he can ultimately shove to the side whenever it gets tough. Whenever the bullets start flying, shove her to the side, basically, is what goes on in this book. That's what's going on. It's really interesting commentary. But again, my catchphrase on the channel is, it's really interesting, don't agree with it. Don't agree with everything in this book, but it is really interesting, food for thought, and it is sort of an evocative reading experience, definitely. More on Troutman, though. He is our narrator. He never really demonstrates any sort of desire or motivation or sort of enthusiasm for much of anything. He's very bored, he's unmotivated, he is self-destructive, he is a leech, he is an abuser that is also in a way kind of a victim because he's sort of subject to these sort of historical circumstances. He was born out of a regime that just couldn't really... I don't know how comfortable I am with characterizing the regime before. Anyway, he's sort of an abuser that is kind of a victim. He's caught between wanting to be a perpetrator of violence and a victim of violence. He doesn't know how to identify himself, and it's tough to identify him in the book. Of course, he is an abuser, and he is a victim, but, you can still, it's tough to dole out any sort of clear moral judgment on him. It really is. He's a nihilist. And also one of the areas that this novel makes sort of really biting critiques in is that, the Third Republic being nihilistic, being an abuser, a victim, being self-destructive, being bored and unmotivated and just kind of useless. It's also a necrophiliac. And that's a really tough piece of commentary here. But I guess beyond talking about the characters, I should just go to the main features of the writing. So the writing, it is very... I'll start out with the good. Bataille is just brilliant when it comes to poetic symbolism, evocative symbols. That's like the dude can almost do no wrong when it comes to employing these symbols that mean a great deal at the right instances, when it sort of, I guess, makes the most impact. He's totally good, and this sort of narrative style of this book is just really wild and unhinged. It really feels like the writer's not even in control of what he's doing, and it's just he might run over anything, he might go anywhere, he might touch anything. It's a very thrilling narrative style of this book, but that also does leave it a little unfocused, and the writing does get kind of clumsy. And I'll show you something that exemplifies basically all of that, right? Of course, this reading will be extremely trucked up, but bear with me. It is a sort of scene where there are people making love in a graveyard. Okay. There was nothing left between us except disillusioned hostility. We could sense it. We mattered little to one another. He's talking about Dirty here. Not at least after anxiety abandoned us. And then, it goes on about getting to the graveyard, but we no longer felt the slightest hope. At one turning in the path, an empty space opened beneath us. Curiously, this empty space at our feet was no less infinite than a starry sky over our heads. Flickering in the wind, a multitude of little lights was filling the night with silent, indecipherable celebration. Those stars, those candles, were flaming by the hundred on the ground where ranks of lighted graves were massed. We were fascinated by this chasm of funereal stars. Dorothea drew closer to me. She kissed me at length on the mouth. She embraced me, holding me violently tight. It was the first time in a long while that she had let herself go. Leaving the path across plowed earth, we took the lovers' dozen steps. We still had the graves below us. Dorothea opened wide, and I bared her to the loins. She in turn bared me. We fell onto the shifting ground, and I sank into the moist body the way a well-guided plow sinks into earth. The earth beneath that body lay open like a grave. Her naked cleft lay open to me like a freshly dug grave. We were stunned, making love over a starry graveyard. Each of the lights proclaimed a skeleton in its grave, and they thus formed a wavering sky as unsteady as the motions of our mingled bodies. It was cold. My hands sank into the earth. I unbuttoned Dorothea, smirching her underclothes and breasts with the cold earth that stuck to my fingers. Emerging from her clothes, her breasts were of a lunar whiteness. We let go of one another from time to time, simply letting ourselves quiver with cold. Our bodies were quivering like two rows of teeth chattering together. The wind made a wild sound in the trees. I said to Dorothea in a stammer. I was stammering and talking wildly. My skeleton, you're shivering. Your teeth are chattering. Right? Sloppily written. In spots, at least the translation is. I mean, I can't really read French that well, especially but Bataille knows what he's doing with language. I can't really talk about his French because number one, I'm reading a translation. I wouldn't really get his French anyways. But just the repetition of certain words leaves that feeling kind of clumsy, right? The grave, that's being repeated. Our bodies were quivering like two rows of teeth chattering together. I said to her, and that comes basically like, my skeleton, you're shivering, your teeth are chattering. It's just repeated. And I'm like, maybe there's a point to those echoes, but it reads sloppy to me. It really does. But that is kind of part of this book is that it's not perfect, but it is just a thrill to read. It's so electrifying, you don't know where it's going to go. And of course there is some barbed commentary that I don't agree with, absolutely, but just the balls of this book really speaks to me. Just the cojones it takes to put this out is really intriguing to me, even though Bataille shelved it for 15 years and he put it out at his friend's behest, I should say. But that passage, on top of being clumsy, it is sort of brilliant poetic symbolism, making love over this graveyard. And what I didn't read, actually, I will read right now. They begin, as they're making love, they begin sliding down this rock onto this sort of overhang, where they slide for maybe about 10 feet down, and then they might fall off the edge. Farther down, the rock formed an overhang. If I hadn't stopped our slide with my foot, we would have fallen into the night, and I might have wondered with amazement if we weren't falling into the void of the sky. That's another thing in this book. All the graves have these candles or these lights by them, and he thinks he's gonna fall into the graves, into the universe. Oh, is that ever beautiful? But also a bigger theme in this book is dissolution. That's what this book seems to be about. Even the title, Blue of Noon, that's in direct contrast to the main passage that I just read. There's so many passages in here where we get a sort of dissolution of the self. You know what I mean? The character is just dissolving. We get a dissolution of Europe, mainly in the sort of political, social aspects of it. You get the dissolution of France, where France just can't pick between any of these three things. The dissolution of Europe also takes place in the passage I'm not going to read, that is maybe the single most horrifying thing I've read from Bataille, because of the way, how true it is. It hurts to read in the best way possible. There is a sort of dissolution of self, of Europe, of France, of sense. Page 74 here has this really interesting passage. I'm not going to read it, but it's basically about thinking about a starry night, an image that recurs over this, and then immediately that image dissolves into its opposite, right? And we get the title Blue of Noon, right? And of course it says right after talking about the darkness, it says the sun was fantastic. It evoked dreams of explosion. Was there anything more sun-like than red blood running over cobblestones as the light could shatter and kill? Right? Yeah, the darkness and the sort of starry universe just transforms, dissolves into its opposite. It's brilliant how that stuff sort of plays out. And it's all sort of, there's a distinct purpose to it. I love that. But again, sloppily written, although it is thrilling, it is electrifying. I'd say totally do this. But on top of that, the dissolution, we get oftentimes characters when they're so sad, when there's so much dread, so much horror, so much pain, their only recourse is to laugh. They're around death. The main character is around so much death. Immediately his recourse is to have sex. There's so much going on, and on top of that, it's not just about France. It's not just set in France. They're going all across Europe. They go to Spain. They go to London. There are so many places that they go where revolution is just around the corner, and Lazar's got her head in all of them, basically. It's a novel that I don't think is very easy to categorize in what it's trying to do or say. For all I say that this novel seems to be very anti-communist, at least with its representation of Lazar, it's not that simple. It's not pro-capitalist. It doesn't seem to me. It seems to be very critical of a lot of directions that Europe is going to, and a lot of the forces that are making Europe this sort of thing that just can't last. It's like just dissolution. Like, it's not easy to categorize politically, but I would say if you like this type of thing, this will certainly be the type of thing that you like. It's Bataille. Understand it. If you like transgressive literature, if you like historical novels, if you like Gravity's Rainbow, actually, that would be the one thing, is if you loved Gravity's Rainbow, read this book. I mean, this thing is totally for the people who love Gravity's Rainbow. If you like the Brigadier Pudding sections, hell yes, this will be a cakewalk for you if you like those sections. If you liked the sort of hallucinatory, sort of almost like punk attitude of, just storytelling, you'll love this book. If you liked the sort of biting historical commentary of Gravity's Rainbow, you'll like this book. The only thing that this book doesn't do that Gravity's Rainbow does, well, actually not the only thing, but because it's just so short, it doesn't have the time to do so much. But this is just one distinct tense throughout, whereas Pynchon will have these sort of really complex narrative scaffoldings that allow him to do anything with the narration. This is very much a set narration, but if you like Gravity's Rainbow, if you like Zheng Zheng Il's When Adam Opens His Eyes, if you like Story of the Eye, you might like this. In some ways I prefer this, but Story of the Eye is definitely the one. Story of the Eye is definitely the one I prefer, just because it is more focused, because this message is more immediate to me. It's something that can apply to my life if I let it, which I'm not sure I'm going to do. So just to keep it a buck, I'm not gonna try to access the truth of this message. There are some truths which you just plain must just stamp right down, and I don't care to engage with the theme of this book in my life, though it has stuck with me. Yeah, that's Blue of Noon in a nutshell. I wish there were more videos out on this. I'm totally gonna get more books from Bataille and read, because he's a very interesting figure. Cool. That's it. That's all. Peace and groovy. And how do you like Blue of Noon? I'm really curious to see who's read this book, who likes it, and have you read his nonfiction? I was talking to a fella on Instagram. I think he has a YouTube channel. I might link to it if I can remember the name. But this fella read The Accursed Share, and he said his philosophy is as unhinged as his fiction, or at least it seemed to me. He said his philosophy is unhinged as well, and bizarre. And the bizarre factor is something that I very much love about Bataille. But anyways, I'm going on too long. I need to shut the hell up. You need me to shut the hell up, right? That's it. That's all. Peace and groovy. Read it. Maybe. Take care.